Hello and welcome to the Little Minds Big Ideas podcast with the Early Years Network. We are back on another Monday morning with you.
We are indeed.
We are. And this week we are finally going to be talking about motivation.
Finally, after we promised it was coming last week.
We promised it was going to come, and then it didn't. But you got a lovely podcast on positive relationships. If you've not checked out last week, give it a listen.
Probably my favourite one so far.
Yeah, I enjoyed this one. It was good. It was a good positive chat.
It was. Like I say, it's nice how you talk about positive relationships and you can go into any direction you want because it has a massive impact across the board.
But no, it was lovely. But before we dive into motivation, you wanted to have a little chat about an article that has been released last week.
Spill some tea.
Really, there's not much tea to be spilled. I
thought when I read it, I thought it was quite catty from Ofsted.
I get it though.
I'm not saying they're wrong. I just thought, for anybody who hasn't...
say to them though, because they put up with a lot of stick from all of us, me included. And they're finally fall back.
And it's normally stick they actually have no control over, because normally most of the stick they get whenever they go to any of these talks is funding related. And it's not like they're sat in their offices controlling funding mechanisms.
No.
But if anybody's missed it, it came... When did the article come out?
It was a Nursery World article, wasn't it?
I know, but the internet's not loading, there's actually no date. But they basically said... we are determined to hear feedback on how we can better strike this balance in the coming months. However, we also suspect that a significant amount of fear about Ofsted inspections is driven by organisations and individuals seeking to profit from inspection preparation where this is entirely unnecessary. It is a source of particular frustration that some of these individuals previously worked for us. Not naming names, but also not pulling no punches, are they? But I do get it.
I don't know any companies that do pre-Ofsted.
Oh, there is.
I'm sure there is, but I've never...
Oh, there is. I've seen online, like, there are certain companies that will, like... I remember one woman said, we received a phone call this Friday evening, so Saturday will be spent in the nursery setting with all the staff, and then we'll be there bright and early Monday morning to do a mock inspection before the real one. I was thinking, crikey, what time in the morning are all the staff having to wake up? Can you imagine saying, right, guys, I need you in on Saturday and we will have to be in by 5 a.m. on Monday?
Yeah, earlier than that, because they could arrive from as soon as you open, really.
But you'd be knackered by the time the actual inspector takes.
Yeah, you would.
You'd be absolutely knackered, wouldn't you?
Well, there you go. They are not happy.
I do get it, though, when they talk about fear-mongering and, like, to go to the lengths of having to come in on a Saturday to then also have to come in early on the Monday to do a mock inspection.
Yeah, no.
It feels like you're doing your exams in school all over again.
And also, like we've said on our Ofsted podcast, if you're not doing it when the day before Ofsted come, don't try and do it. Like, don't have someone scare you into trying to do something differently on the day. Like, it's not worth it.
Absolutely. And you know what? You're putting more pressure on your teams.
Yeah.
By the management carrying out this sort of thing, you're putting more pressure on the individuals in your business.
Again, that's not going to build motivation.
And it's not going to help anyone. Like, it's not going to help if you're nervous about something. It's like when you do exams in school, you don't actually sit a mock exam before you do your exams because you're just going to quit.
You do?
You might do. No, not the day of, not the morning.
Oh, no, before, yeah.
Yeah, but way before, because then you know what you need to work on and stuff. Absolutely, I get that. But you wouldn't do it at 8 o'clock in the morning before a 9 o'clock exam.
No.
And I just think you're lumping too much pressure on.
To be fair, I remember doing my exams, they'd say, like if you don't know it the morning of, you're not going to know it, so don't even bother looking at your notes and stuff.
And all the things when we talk about Ofsted and all the bits and pieces that they look for, they want to see, it takes months to embed this type of stuff, and it takes years to sort of get the team on board, to get a vision like we always talk about, and to get to that. Worrying about it last minute,
no point.
Paying all this money out to do all these things, you're barking up the tree. And hey, look, it might work for a few people, and you might get away with it and get an outstanding because of it, but by and large,
it probably wasn't that pre-inspection, whatever, mock exam, whatever, mock inspection that got you your outstanding. It's the work you do for months and months and months.
If a company's willing to dump money into it and do all these, but they're probably also willing to invest in other areas of the business and probably are working very hard
to do that.
Passionate staff. That's probably where a lot of it comes from. But yeah, I just saw it and thought it'd be worth chatting through. Yeah, okay.
Building your team. Yeah. Right, motivation.
Let's talk about motivation.
So Ben's going to jump into a bit more of the sciencey side behind it, aren't you?
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about the environmental factors, social factors that come into motivation as well.
Well, I just wanted to start by talking about the science behind motivation, because I think if you're going to talk about what makes motivated individuals and you're going to talk about what separates really motivated people or children and unmotivated individuals or children. I mean, this is always context-led. So someone might be really motivated to play sport, but then might be really unmotivated to do maths.
Yeah.
And it will change from individual to individual. The odds of someone being highly motivated across all branches of social life, and it just doesn't exist. There's nowhere to be knackered. You haven't got enough time in the day to be motivated to do all these things.
Yeah.
So context is always king. But one thing that we know biologically, the makeup of your brain, the makeup of the types of neurotransmitters you have in the brain, the way it all interlinks, the biology behind it plays a really big role. I mean, there was a study done in 2012. I can't remember the names involved, but in essence, they had a group of people. And this group of people had to take part in maths sort of game, a mathematical game. And it was linked to financial reward. So the better they did in the game, think of it like, I don't know, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but maths related. So the better you did, the more money you earned.
You got, okay.
I don't think it was.
Following.
I don't think it was like £1 million if you won, but so basically what he was looking at is those that were highly motivated, because they were all strapped up to brain imaging while they were doing these things. Those that were highly motivated and did really, really well, or even just motivated, sorry, not necessarily did well, but just really motivated to do it, they could see the activity within the prefrontal cortex, that rationale part of the brain. If you don't know what I'm talking about, hop over to the Earth Here's Network and check out my introduction to neuroscience, where we break down upper, lower brain and what all these things mean. But in essence, this prefrontal cortex of the brain, the bit of the brain that's the rational, the thinking part of the brain, it showed that there was high levels of dopamine and other drugs that the body and the brain pumps into itself as almost like a self-rewarding thing. It's probably the easiest way to talk about.
Positive chemical, that one.
It's the positive. So you've got dopamine and you've got other types of chemicals that will also do similar type things. Right. And in essence, that was flooding that part of the brain. So the brain was almost rewarding itself for taking part in these mathematical challenges. Mm-hmm. And that's why they were so motivated to do it, because by doing it, they were getting a feel-good factor from it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
So it's the brain's way of self-rewarding. And then you have the other individuals who weren't motivated to do it, regardless of the financial reward. And from what they saw within the brain imaging was that there was high amounts of dopamine activity within the middle part of the brain, let's call it. It has other technical names, but let's just call it the middle bit. And this is the bit that was more involved with emotional regulating, the emotional part of the brain, somewhat connected to the limbic system and what we know of the limbic system in terms of being that emotional, that older part, the ancient part of our brain. And again, what this shows is that people can be rewarded for not being motivated. Does that make sense? So by not taking part in it, the brain is self-rewarding them as a mechanism, as a whatever. Now, what is interesting, we're going to delve into the rest of this podcast now, is we understand then biologically there is major factors in play in terms of what is motivating people as well. Because if this is affecting adults, then it most certainly will be at play in some way, shape or form within children. So biological factors are massive. And we spoke about this sort of on last week's podcast where we talked about nature versus nurture.
Yes,
we talked about the elements of biologically, everyone is born different and you're not all even when you're born. Some people have an advantage athletically. Some people have an advantage cognitively, educationally. They have better brain capabilities, memory function, blah, blah, blah. But environment has a major impact then on development the rest of the way. Yeah. So your environment and your experiences, you could be, like I say, born the most biologically gifted child ever. But if you suffer abuse and things like that, then you'll never live up to that potential. Your brain structure will change. You'll be gripped with toxic stress and things like that. You'll never become that most intelligent person in the world. It's like the most gifted football player ever has probably never played football.
Probably not. No.
There's a good chance that actually the most gifted football ever was born in Congo and never had the privilege to be able to play on a nice, lovely football pitch and live that life because they had to do other things. And so the odds are the greatest footballer who lived never actually kicked the ball. Yeah.
Biologically, yeah.
So then if we understand that, then the rest of this podcast is about diving into, okay, so biologically that is an impact. What else is an impact? So if you've got two children who are both biologically predisposed to that, neurotransmitters are really healthy and it transmits into the prefrontal cortex, why is one then really motivated and one's not?
Yeah.
Well, because there is other factors at play. Just because you're biologically, intrinsically that way, there are then other factors. And we're going to dive into things like social factors, We're going to dive into experiences. We're going to talk about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, punishment, reward, preconditioning, all that type of thing.
We are.
In this podcast.
We are. So jumping into what we've got next on our list.
Yeah.
Personality traits. Yeah. So I think you've said it there, like everyone is different. So when we think about motivation, yes, obviously our biological makeup does make a difference in the way that our brain rewards us for being motivated or not. But actually, everyone is different. So the way that your personality affects motivation does play a part as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't remember what I was going to say. It's gone out of my head.
So when we're talking about self-efficacy, it's all about how you view yourself in comparison to others.
That's what I was going to say. Yes, the way that you look at, I was reading the word efficacy, but I couldn't figure out how to say it in my head. Self-efficacy is a bit difficult with my retainer in. Apologies, everyone. The way you view yourself is a big motivator as well. And I think it also depends on the situation you're in, because depending on where you're, like as an adult, the way you view yourself helps it with the way you're motivated. Because if you want others to be proud of you and do things like that as well, and if you succeed, the way that makes you feel, the more motivated you will be to complete a task.
Yeah.
And it's the same with children as well.
And self-efficacy boils down to how you view yourself in relation to other people.
Yeah.
So if you have a high self-efficacy, it sort of links into self-esteem, self-worth, you're going to be motivated to do something. Whereas if you immediately don't think you're good enough to do something, your natural want to do it, your desire to do it, i.e. your motivation to do it,
it's already on the floor, isn't it?
It's not going to be high. You can think of we can all think of loads of things in life where we view ourselves down, if that makes sense. Like, I can't run that time and that distance, or I can't do this, I can't do that. I mean, running's always one. Like, majority of people are capable of running, I don't know, 5, 10K, whatever it might be, but the amount of people you talk, oh no, I couldn't do that. When in reality, you probably could, but you have to have that motivation there to be able to do it. Yeah, so it's all intrinsically linked when we talked about personality traits and things like that when it comes to motivation.
No, you're right. I think as well, it's like you say, we've talked about being driven and resilient to do those things. And that comes down to the individual personality trait as well, because some people are just more resilient than others. And if you are more resilient, you're more likely to be motivated to keep going because you don't want to.
Well, that links into the next one. So cognitive factors, when we talk about self-regulation, and you're talking about, if we bring this back to early childhood, the more ability or the more prepared a child is to be able to take part in self-regulation, so where they are in terms of their emotional development, probably stems then that the more likely they are or capable they are to be motivated to do something. Because if a child is able to regulate their emotions, then they're able to stay within this sort of status quo, if you like. They're able to regulate themselves to a point. And if you regulate it, and then we all know at that point, you're more able to dial into motivation and other cognitive skills such as memory function, and thus be able to be motivated to complete whatever said task that we're talking about. Because if you're in a state of deregulation, you're not going to be able to take part in those types of tasks, are you? So when we talk about being motivated, being regulated is also a major thing.
Yeah.
And same for adults. You know, it doesn't just end with children. It's the same for adults.
No, it is, yeah.
You know, your ability to drive gets less and less the more road rage you suffer, because you're more likely to make an accident on the road, or make a mistake, when you're in that state of deregulation, aren't you?
That heightened state of it. I think it's like you said about self-regulation, but it's also in a sense of, for children as well as adults, it's that setting goals. Some people are really love to have a goal set, whether that's a short-term goal or a long-term goal. Now, for children, short-term goals give them something to be motivated for. So if you've got a short-term goal, I don't know, of tidy up time.
Yeah.
The short-term goal is that we're all going to tidy up 5 pieces. Everyone pick up 5 things off the floor.
Yeah.
That's a really easy task to complete, you'd like to think, of given the age. And that is going to be motivating because it's a short-term goal that they're able to achieve. Whereas if somebody doesn't think if they're not at that point where they don't care about the goal that's set or what they want to achieve, they're going to be less motivated to do it.
It's actually interesting when you think about it, because as you're saying that, it sort of dawned on me that children's inability to quite grasp time and have the cognitive understanding of relative time, makes it quite difficult to set goals.
Yeah.
And if you can't set like long-term goals, I mean, lots of us in life are motivated by long-term goals, i.e. I'm going to work really, really, really hard now in my business. So financially, I'm secure by the time I get to 40, 50, 60, whatever it might be. That's a major goal for a lot of people in society. Or it might be a long-term goal and I currently weigh, 19 stone and I want to be 13 stone. Long-term goal. Like a lot of us have those long-term goals, and in order to achieve that long-term goal, I have medium and short-term goals, i.e. tonight I'm not just going to sit on the sofa and eat cake and drink red wine. Do you know what I mean? Like that helps me or I'm not going to go out on Saturday night and splurge 100 quid and whatever it might be.
Yeah.
There's then links into that long. Whereas children, they don't really have that ability to comprehend
and that's why I say
anything outside of the now.
No, that's why I say those short-term goals are what builds motivation for children, because they can see the end there.
Yeah.
They want to achieve it. So it helps with that motivation building as well.
Whilst they're learning their comprehension around time and time relativity and that goal setting ability comes through cognitive learning. Because when you just think about it, that doesn't really come into play until past primary school. I mean,
yeah, maybe.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? It's something you don't really ever comprehend.
All of a sudden you just have an idea of time.
Well, I think do you know what? I think the first thing that comes to it is the pressures that come with exams.
Maybe.
When you start having to think of, I've got to work hard now because I've got my exams in May, and if I don't get a good grade, I'm going to get a bollocking.
Like your year 2 SATs.
I know, but I feel like year 2 SATs, they sort of just pass you by, don't they? I don't think.
Maybe, but I remember doing them.
I like to think not many children have to. Yeah, you're right. I was thinking because you got those books, didn't you? I remember having to sit through and go through the books. So I honestly think the exams are probably what starts to set.
Yeah, your long-term goals.
Understanding of long-term goals for the very first time.
Yeah.
Because in preschool, you don't really get. I mean, the closest you get.
The only one you could do with a long-term goal is if you were. This is so niche, and I don't know why I thought of this, but if you are gardening,
right?
And you plant something, and the long-term goal is that we keep these plants alive when they grow.
It's something we don't think enough of, though, isn't it?
Every day, what are we going to do to help them grow?
Yeah,
we're going to water them, make sure they've got sunlight every day. So that's our short-term goal, is to remember to do that every day, and the long-term goal is that these flowers will grow. I guess that is something that you have to wait for, but it's not a personal one.
Yeah, because I think goal setting is something we probably don't. Like when we've delved into it now, you actually realise there's probably a massive area within that that's really important as well. And I think, sorry, we're keeping you up on the podcast.
Sorry, I don't know what's wrong with me. Apologies. 6 o'clock in the morning, morning.
I think we have to think about how we can set goals and create. And that's why I always like team projects and doing things like that, because it sets that togetherness and it gives them a purpose then for time. And like you say, gardening is actually probably a really good one. Because another one you see where it comes into effect, I don't like it personally, but the whole kind of building up to Christmas, elf on the shelf, make sure you're good for Christmas, otherwise you're off Santa's good list and you're on the naughty list. That's setting a future goal in a way, isn't it?
Yeah,
because it builds up to Christmas. So it's one of the few times children actually interact with the concept of time, like a month, and counting down the month and doing bits and pieces. Because otherwise, children don't really have much interaction with a calendar.
No.
Bit of a weird.
Interesting.
Bit of a weird.
That kind of leads us into your social and environmental links with motivation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because having motivated role models is going to help children to be motivated. I think it's really.
I think actually we probably got the order wrong here a little bit, because I think after biological factors in terms of motivation, I think social motivation is probably the biggest.
Social link.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, right, yeah.
But I think probably this comes after. I think self-efficacy probably should come after this, because your experience in social context then probably has a massive definition on your vision of yourself, i.e. through self-efficacy. So
with you, I'm following.
We probably should have sort of talked about this first. But I think we always talk about positive role models. And I think that positive role models and also the environment from a motivation are probably like the two biggest extrinsic motivational factors.
When we look at it in early years, I think it's your environment plays a massive part in motivating children, because you've got to represent their interests. If a child feels that their interests are represented, then they're going to feel motivated to learn, because they're going to feel that curiosity is going to take over and they're going to want to explore.
Yeah.
So when they're interested in it, so that's going to be a big motivator. Is your environment set up for them to challenge their learning a little bit higher than they think they're currently at? So that's where their self-esteem comes into it. Like, okay, this environment's going to push me a little bit, so I'm going to be motivated to do a bit more. And I think that is a really big part of motivation in early years, because your environment can help you to steer motivation in different ways.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That makes sense.
I think we always go on about this on this podcast, about how important social learning is, and if you're taking part in an activity socially, I mean, we're bleeding here into the culture of talking about competitiveness. And that for a lot of people, competitiveness is a major motivational factor.
Hope for you it is.
Yes, but also for children though. You see it in children all the time, like, oh, I want to be at the front of the queue and then walk that bit faster, and someone's always got to be in the lead, and then you'll always have slow coach in the back who couldn't give a monkey's tuppence about how fast everyone else is getting.
Yeah,
but
we'll take our time.
But again, then you start to see the biological influences and the brain rewarding itself for being at the front, but also the brain rewarding itself is just like, meh.
Taking my time, enjoying the scenery and the walk.
I'm mellow. Yeah. I'm good.
So chill. But that's why you're, like you say, social. I think another one that is a good motivator for children is when other children tell them to stop.
Yeah.
So if you're
self-policing.
If you're working on a project, or you're getting ready to go outside and someone is being silly and not putting their coat on, when another child says, come on, we're going to lose this, or we're not going to be first done it, that is kind of a little bit of a motivator as well, because actually somebody else who's a peer to them, who they see as similar, has said, like, get your ass in gear, I don't want to lose.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a motivator as well. And then they start to, the way they perceive themselves can go one or two ways. It can either be, oh God, but my ideas up, crack on with it, or it can be, oh, I'm not good enough, they don't think I'm good enough to be in this.
The pressure's to confined with the social norms, social rules, everybody else within society, that has a massive impact on, and this also comes out of like people's morals, understanding and moral reasoning, the understanding of right to wrong.
Yeah.
And that's not just in terms of like motivational to get a task done or achieve something, but then motivation to actually behave.
Yeah.
Or behave as we would define it.
As we want them to behave.
And we're going to talk about that probably
later on
in a little bit when we talk about punishment and all that jazz.
Yeah, I think we've just got on to cultural norms, but I think
norms.
Having your norms.
Cultural norms.
I said norms.
You sound like you said cultural norms.
Cultural norms.
Nom.
I think as well that comes into your personal values, which links back to your individual personality traits and things like how do you value yourself? How do you value what you're doing? What values do you hold yourself up to? That is a big link to motivation as well. Yeah. Because if you are quite a proud person and you like to get things done in a certain way, and you're, I don't know, all those different things that come with that, you're going to be motivated to do a good job. Whereas if you don't really hold yourself to that much regard, your values of yourself aren't that high, your motivation levels to complete things in certain ways might not be as high as well. So I think cultural values and norms, it's also your own as well. Stop laughing at me.
So you say norms, it sounds like noms. Maybe I'm be interested to other people's feedback is, because it sounds like...
No, I don't want to hear any feedback on the way I talk.
Cultural nom.
I've got retainer in and struggling. There's a lot of S's in this podcast today. The next one we wanted to talk about was life experiences.
Yeah.
So is it the way that you've been brought up? Because, again, that links to kind of the social aspect as well. But your life experiences in that you have had to be motivated to complete lots of tasks. Yeah. Does that then get to the point where you're not motivated anymore, like you're burnt out? If you're trying to, like we talked about earlier, you can't be motivated in everything. No. Do you expect too much from yourself? But then also those life experiences of when you've wanted to complete something and you've been motivated to do it and you completed it to a high level, the positive rewards that came out of that. Yeah. That's a good reason to build your motivation even more. So like we said, for exams, if you've worked really hard and the reward was positive, the more likely it is that when you go to future education, you're going to be motivated to keep going because the reward was positive.
And vice versa.
And if you didn't do so well, even though you put all that work in, you're going to be like, what's the point?
And the funny is, it all links after a while, because then you go back to self-regulation, self-resilience, how much of a bounce back ability you have in terms of once you've had a setback. I don't know why this is into my head, but I recently saw something online where it was talking about, Millie Bobby Brown. She's in, I said her name wrong.
Yeah, no, you have. I think we're going to talk about it. No, Millie Bobby Brown.
Oh, that is Millie Bobby Brown.
Yeah.
And she's in the news because she didn't get the role in Game of Thrones. You seen that?
Oh, no, I didn't.
So there's an article going.
I thought you were going to talk about the fact that she changes her accent everywhere she goes, and I think it's brilliant.
I've only ever heard her talk in
a British accent.
No, what was she in? No.
Strange Things.
She played 17 or whatever it is. 11.
I haven't watched it, I know.
I've watched it. So she went for the role of, Mormont, the little girl who was the leader of her clan in the north. Remember towards the end of it, and she then plays Ellie in, the girl who actually got the role plays Ellie in Last of Us.
Last of Us, yeah.
So she got the role.
I was disappointed with that.
Okay, but it hasn't finished yet. But so she.
I'm not motivated to watch season 2 because the end.
You nearly cried.
I did, but it was a bit flat. Anyway, sorry, I've gone off.
So she was, what it was saying is basically Millie Bobby Brown considered packing up acting because she didn't get that role. So she was obviously really wanted that role. But then she persevered and eventually got the role with Stranger Things. That then obviously became the golden ticket for Netflix and blah, blah, blah. Her career's done really well. And it just goes to show, I don't know why that came to my head, but that perseverance, that self-esteem. And
she'd have been great in Game of Thrones.
I know. But as we were talking about, but she may never have got the gig then in Stranger Things.
True.
And, that was a little role in Game of Thrones. And Stranger Things, she was like the main character. So I guess, things happen for a reason, don't they?
They do.
And, but no, I just wanted to link that then to when we're talking about children and we're talking about developing early childhood.
I just thought, sorry, we were talking about life experiences. What a niche life experience for so many of us to relate. I remember when I didn't go the part in Game of Thrones that I went for, but I persevered and I was on a 4-series. I
don't know, but I'm a millionaire anyway.
I'm a millionaire because I did a Netflix series and now I'm in so many other things.
God, it's like
what a niche life experience.
It's like that time Gordon Ramsay was a podcast. He was telling this sob story where he had nowhere to live. Him and his wife had nowhere to live. And they were broke because all they had in their bank account was 200-something grand. Enough to put, just short of being able to put enough money down for a new house, and a new house, i.e. like £1 million plus house in Chelsea.
I was going to go with as an adult when you go for a job interview and you don't get it.
Yeah.
Which is very similar to Millie Bobby Brown.
Yeah.
But a little bit more like you're not going to get every job you apply for, but it's how you bounce back and you go again.
And so what I think ultimately what we're trying to get down to here is when we're talking about how we can develop motivated children in early childhood.
Yeah.
It is the combination of the extrinsic and the intrinsic. So that inner motivation, which a lot of it's biologically led, and then also the environmental external factors that have a major impact.
I think that bounce back is your intrinsic, isn't it? Like how well do you bounce back? What's your motivation to keep going?
It is, but it's not like we're saying, oh, right, okay, then that is just c'est la vie, it is what it is. There's nothing we can do about it. It's biological.
Yeah.
Because what we can do is we can help through co-regulation to develop self-regulation.
We can be those positive role models.
Yeah. So though the neurotransmitters, there's not a lot we can do. What we can do is help them become regulated adults who have the ability and techniques to deal with regulation so that they can deal with tasks. And we can help them with steps like that and understanding, like we talked about earlier, setting long-term goals and having that cognitive awareness. So by developing their emotional abilities, their cognitive abilities, we can really help them become more motivated. And then as we touched on earlier, you talk about the environmental factors in terms of setting the environment and creating and using resources that are interest to them, that excite them, that get them engaged. Then we could start talking about curiosity and that innate inquiry and their self-driven want to learn and play. Enjoyment is a massive thing. Kids getting the opportunity to play and enjoy what they're doing, enjoy spending time with you, positive relationships, creating those bonds, taking part in things that, like we said last week, have that mutual joy, that mutual bond of playing, having a laugh, that togetherness.
Yeah, I agree.
All these things help shape and motivate the children.
Yeah, they do. And now the last thing we wanted to touch upon was extrinsic. Is that the right word? Is that what you say?
Extrinsic.
Yeah, factors. Now, when we talked about this in our little pre-podcast chat, we talked about the use of sticker chart.
Yeah, so like external rewards and motivation.
Yeah. Now, everyone's got a different opinion on these type of motivators. And it really does come down to the individual child.
Yeah.
And I think we all know, being in the industry, that there's some children that live for a sticker chart, live for a stamp, live for that positive reward for doing something good. But that doesn't mean we should take away from the fact that we are teaching them what is good, not just how to be good.
Yeah, it comes down to a term called operant conditioning. Yes. So it's like, this comes from, Skinner.
With the rats.
And the ideas of like behaviourists and people like that. The terminology.
Skinner that did the rats?
I don't know, you just said with the rats. I can't remember.
Well, I'm sure it's operant conditioning, where they learned that if they touched it would get cheese.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
And then eventually they touched it and it shocked them, and then they didn't touch it again.
Because then you also had Matey Boy with the rats. I can't remember what his name was, the rat tickler who did, who Ben Kingston Hughes talks about in his course.
Oh, where they play?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's different.
It talks about,
conditioning.
He was talking about sexy rats.
I was talking about the conditioning rat. Different rats.
Do you know what? To say his early years, there's a lot of rat fiddlers out there.
Anyway,
behaviourists, operant conditioning. The idea that, in a really sort of crude nutshell, is the concept of enforcing what we deem as positive behaviour through punishment.
Yeah.
So children learn to behave how we want amongst the social norms, the rules, the boundaries, whatever we might put in place. They learn to behave because if they don't, they'll be punished.
But I do think you have to have some sort of positive reward for behaviour as well, though.
Yeah, but it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because you do...
But you do have to teach children what the good behaviour is. And I'm not saying you get punished for not, but there also has to be consequences to behaviour. So if you do a really good job at tidying up and you're the only one that's done a good job of tidying up and everyone else is just jollied off to the book corner, you can have a sticker. And no, the others can't.
Yeah, but...
Because that child has learned that that's what we're doing at tidy up time and they're going to get reward for it.
Yeah.
The rest of them haven't.
That's not what I mean. That's not learning from punishment. Learning from punishment is like, oh, you've not concentrated or got a good enough piece of work there. You've lost your lunchtime.
Yeah, that's older up. That's older, isn't it? Because here, I'd like to think...
Wasn't that long ago that there was a certain individual on national television telling people to stick children on naughty steps of an age that we deal with in early years? The stupid nanny. But is it? Do you know what I'm saying though? So
she also did do the thing of like, there's consequences for behaviour. So when but Ben, some of the behaviour on that show though, if someone was throwing the plates of food that I made for them as well, I think I'd be pretty pissed off about it.
All right, okay, but getting away from the extremes, in general, what we're trying to have a conversation is the generic. We're in the middle here. We're not talking about the polar extremes.
Might be.
But if we look at children as a whole, if you want to teach them about behaviour, if you want to teach them about, so we keep saying social norms and the rules and everything we play by, teach them the consequences of their action, teach them about what they're doing, as opposed to just having a black and white rule book of punishment.
Yes.
Because what you're actually teaching them, it's like the old analogy of the man whose dog kept shitting in the middle of the lounge. Time and time again, every time the dog shit in the middle of the lounge, you'd go up to the dog, wipe its nose in the feces, and then lob them out the window. And what happened eventually? What happened eventually after months of doing this? The man walked in, saw the dog had shit in the middle of the lounge, went to grab him, but before he could, the dog wiped his nose in the shit and threw himself out the window. Because what he's learned is not to shit in the house, but actually what to do once he has shit in the house.
Yes, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
And so it's about teaching the children the difference between, let's say, right and wrong, and the values behind it, and why we don't steal toys off our friends, or why we don't punch other people, because what it does to the other people's feelings, the physical harm.
That's where you go through the talking through the emotions, etc. Yeah,
you will see it all the time in early years when a child will do something wrong, and before anybody even says it, he says sorry. The child isn't sorry.
No,
he's just learned through the practitioner telling him to say sorry. He's not sorry. He's sorry in the slightest, because he's going to do it again next week. But you see what I mean? And that's the difference between actually trying to teach and embed values.
When we think about sticker charts and stuff and stickers and things, I do think they are good motivators for children, because at the end of the day, if the children know that is the good to do and they tell you about it and you reward them with a sticker, then that's a good thing. Then they want to continue to be behaving like that because they know that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Do you know, the crux of this whole thing is, and this is a bit of a cop-out, but the answer is always, as always, somewhere in the middle.
Oh, yeah, no. And as I'm saying, it goes down to the individual because every child is different and every child is motivated by different things. If you've got a child who's toilet training and every time they go to the toilet or use the potty or whatever, for months and months, even after they've finished toilet training, wants a stamp on their hand, why not? Like, it's not causing them any harm. And even when they don't get one, it's not meaning they're not using the toilet.
I mean, we can even flip this to talk about adults in the workplace. What motivates them? I mean, when you think about motivation as adults, in work, pay is obviously a massive one. Yeah. The reason why we all come to work and do what we do is financial gain. I don't think it's pay and then biscuits. Is it? Or am I missing something?
I don't know.
Is that, for me, probably that would be the order.
I was just thinking of things in my head.
Because I think it's that, and then I think it's professional development, individual development of yourself.
Yeah.
Are you growing as what you are professionally? Are you growing as a person? I think a lot of people put weight on that. Yeah. There's often studies show that, yes, financial is obviously a major one and always will be a major one. But if people actually feel like they're valued, they're being developed, they're learning new skills, those type of things as well, I was just as likely to retain staff and keep them happy and keep everyone positive as much as a motivator as financial reward. And then you say you've got a lot of the little things like showing appreciation in the staff room with bits and pieces, it being generally a nice place to work.
I was going to say also like just positivity, positive comments.
Being a nice place to be.
Say thank you. Like it makes a big big difference. Yeah.
And I think then it's no different for children in that sense. Obviously, they're not being paid to come to nursery.
No, they're not.
But the big reward for them often then is, like we say, is that driver of, if they've not developed this prefrontal cortex yet, this consciousness, this thought thinking part of their brain, they're reacting mainly on emotional impulse. So if they want a toy, they're going to take it, regardless of how much you teach them things. If they've not developed that part of the brain yet, reasoning and things like that won't take place yet. No. So it's about as much as helping them develop this part of the brain and doing those bits and pieces that we can through co-regulation, talking about future goal setting, cognitive development, all those things that we do in early years anyway. And we just have to limit our expectations.
Yeah.
So wanting children to achieve something by giving them stickers and things like that, if they're not ready yet to rationally understand what you're trying to get them to understand.
I understand that, yeah.
But then you also got to think of the flip side of what it would do for that child who is constantly failing to do what you're asking them to do, so never actually gets the sticker. Does that make sense? I remember when I was in year one, don't know why I remember this, I just remember being in year one of primary school, they used to have a stamp thing, so if you did really well, you got to get the stamp and stamp, that you had your name and then like blank space and you got stamps and everything. When I was in that part of primary school, up until about year 4, I really struggled to sit still. Like I had a really good imagination. And I really struggled to then sit still and concentrate because I wanted to go play and do all these bits. I had a lot of energy and a high stimulated imagination. So I struggled in year 1 to then bang, all you have to now sit down and spend 6 hours of the day concentrating on being in school. I really struggled with that. So I remember I had no stamps. I never had any stamps. And it's little things like that you do, obviously, it's enough of an experience in life to remember. And
as I'm saying, I don't think that these rewards should be used as punishment for everybody, like for people that don't do it. But those that do it, get a reward. But if you know that the child, but then if I know you can't sit still, let's find something we can reward you for. Let's find a way for you to learn in a different way, is what I'm saying.
But then has it not lost its purpose and meaning?
No.
But you're just now looking for a reason to give me a stamp. So you're going to give me it no matter what.
No, but I think the reason for giving you the stamp, everyone shouldn't be having the same thing. The task is to complete X, Y, and Z before the end of the day. I don't get how you achieve them, but as long as you achieve it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
I just think now you're searching to give a child a sticker for the sake of giving a child. You're going to give everyone generically a sticker no matter what.
Yeah, but then that's the opposite, isn't it? Because I want everyone to achieve and motivate them. So I want them to do it. Whereas you're now saying no, because if you lose, you lose.
No, but you've given everyone everyone anyway. So what's the point of them in the first place?
Because if you don't complete all the tasks because you've been dicking around all day, that's not my fault. You don't get a stamp.
But are they dicking around because actually they struggle with that concentration? They struggle to do what you're asking them to do.
The task that I'm asking them to do isn't sit down at a desk. If I'm asking you to do 3 things throughout the day, whether that be make sure your books are in the tray before you go out for lunch. I don't know what else it could be. Make sure your coats are... Do you know what I mean? 3 things. If you haven't done those things and you're more than capable of doing them, I'm not asking you to sit at the desk, then you don't get a stamp. If your book is still on the floor and you go out for lunch, that's not due to anything of the fact that you can't sit still. Yeah. You've just not followed an instruction. So what I'm saying is that the stamps are there and should be achievable. If you're going to do a group stamp, the end goal has to be achievable for everyone. But if the child chooses not to do it, that's not on you. That's not because the task wasn't achievable. If all I've asked you to do is put your books away every time you leave the room, make sure your coat's on your peg and, I don't know, something with your shoes. If a child's capable of doing those 3 things, but they are not doing them, then no, they don't get the reward. It's not because I've asked them to sit still for 6 hours and they're not capable of doing that. Do you hear what I'm saying?
I do, but I get it. And I agree, but I also disagree.
Okay.
I think it's a really hard topic, and the more we delve into it, the more you actually realise it is quite...
It's so broad, and it's so, like, motivation is different in everybody, and I think that's where we'll just have to end.
It's difficult because you're talking about individuals, and every individual is so complexly different.
Yeah.
And then you're also talking about different contexts, from tidying up to potty training to doing something else. To moral development. Like, it's so wide and so vast.
Yeah.
And the answer actually is probably keying into if we were talking about an individual child and a situation, it'd probably be a lot easier. And I think a lot of it stems down. I personally don't like external motivation, because I don't, in terms of like reward charts and things like that, because I don't really know how effective it is at truly learning and developing moral understanding or reasoning or anything like that, because you're actually just learning to do a task for the sake of doing a task to get the reward, as opposed to truly understanding the why behind what you're doing.
The world we live in, I go to work because there's a financial reward at the end. So I have to go to work and I have to do my job to get that financial reward.
You're just saying we're all basically robots anyway.
But it is the truth. Like you said, I don't want to teach children. You have to do things to get the reward.
But what I would say then, okay, if we're talking about a child pushing another child or stealing a book, he's learned that if he does it in front of you, he'll get punished.
But he does it.
But then
you break the law in front of a police officer, you're going to be cool. Yeah. If you don't, then you might not.
Yeah, but we aren't all murdering people just because the police aren't watching.
Well, we were stealing books. We weren't murdering people.
Do you know what I mean, though? We all innately know. Like, the reason why we don't want to go to jail isn't just because we'll end up in jail and we'll have to sit in a prison cell. It's also because innately we understand that murdering someone's inherently absolutely wrong. Yes. And it's not something I actually particularly ever think I want to do.
That's not what I was saying. You said about the reward that comes with doing things. So you do it because there's a reward at the end. That is everything, though. And I think regardless of how you look at it with children and sticker charts and adults and finance, unfortunately, that is the world we live in. We all do things to get the reward or to avoid the punishment or avoid the negativity.
I think it stems back to what we started with, doesn't it? In terms of the biological element to it and what part of your brain. If you thinking about it, certain children will get hit with dopamine and will get filled with positive chemicals as a result of receiving that star that they can stick on their sticker chart. Some children won't. Some children will naturally just get that dopamine hit from doing something kind for someone else and following those moral principles. So it's probably actually the result, and we've answered our own question in such that based upon that, a child's intrinsic motivation, those biological factors that are motivating them, we then have to shape our practice around that individual child. It's up to us to figure out what the triggers are for the child and what encourages them, engages them biologically, what is motivating and driving them. But at the same time, making sure that children don't feel left out and that actually we're not providing them negative experiences, providing other people positive experiences.
Of course.
And then leaning on those social factors and those role modelling and co-regulation and those social interactions that also have a major
that come with it
supporting act to those biological elements. And that is the podcast all wrapped up. And there's your answer.
Let us know what you think on motivation for children, those internal and external motivators. Let us know in the comments. Be interesting to hear everyone's thoughts.
Yeah, I didn't.
After our 2 pence of that.
Yeah, I didn't expect this one to quite go the way it went.
Tough.
But no, it's interesting, isn't it? It's an interesting debate around motivate. You wouldn't have thought it would be this complex.
No, but it is.
But when you actually think about it, of all the topics we discussed, motivation is probably the hardest thing to put your finger on.
As well, yeah.
And that's, like I say, because it's like so different for individual people. Even if we sat and I said to you, listening to this, what is it that most motivates you generally in the workplace? I mean, and
what is it?
Varies from person to person, and it varies from what we're talking about, whether it be family, whether it be sport, work. You motivate in all different ways and in different capacities and to different extents.
You're right. You're so right.
Hopefully.
We wrap it up.
I think we should wrap it up.
Okay. Enjoy the rest of your week, everybody.
We'll have to think about what we're going to do next week.
Yeah.
Any suggestions?
Let us know in the comments.
Drop them in the comments.
And yes, have a lovely week, and we will see you in the next one.
Bye, guys.
Bye.